Hello and welcome to episode 87 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Suzie, I am your host, and I'm an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. One of the questions I get asked most, whether it's by email or DMs on social media, is for book recommendations. And I have done a podcast episode with 5 books I would recommend to everybody. And in that episode, I find it quite difficult to give people book recommendations unless they give me a specific topic. So say, for example, somebody wants to understand the Dharma types. I can specifically give them a book in respect of the Dharma types, but I don't recommend a book about the Dharma types if that isn't something that someone is feeling pulled to, because we have to be very careful to remember that we have a magnetic center, and that's going to pull to us the teachings, the teachers, the information that we need right now. So I try to ask you all to be very specific when it comes to book recommendations, not because I'm trying to be difficult, but because different things are going to resonate with different people at different times on their journey. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode. And those were books that I really considered would suit anybody on the spiritual journey, regardless of the traditions and teachings that they're feeling called to work with. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about how to read, how to approach spiritual books. And I want to say this first of all, that I really do hope that this comes across with the intention that I have, that is that you find this helpful and useful, not in any way, shape or form patronizing. I don't want any of you to feel like I'm teaching you how to suck eggs. If you already know and if you've already been taught this stuff, that's great. Please skip past this episode. But what I find a lot with people who I work with one-on-one, who maybe are in the membership, is they come to me and they want some book recommendations on something, but they don't actually know how to approach esoteric texts. And that's what I want to get into today. First of all, what do I mean by esoteric texts? And what I mean by that are spiritual books or spiritual texts that are to be read from an esoteric study perspective. So the esoteric is the internal journey, and it's about reading certain books by certain people from that internal journey perspective, not from a literal perspective. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today when I'm talking about the how-to and the tips. Now, there are lots of what I'm going to call very loosely here today spiritual self-help books out there. And there is nothing wrong with these texts. Some of these texts are amazing, and they give you really good tips, information, guidance, practices that you can do to help you on your way. Okay, so these are the types of books that you can read through quite easily, quite quickly. So when I say spiritual self-help, what I mean is that it's maybe a book on how to practice meditation, or a book on the different human design types, or a book on surrender. All of these books are great. But what you're going to find on your spiritual journey is there's going to come a point where you're reading all of these kind of spiritual self-help books and you find that they're all essentially saying the same thing. They're all telling you to do your practice. Okay. And it's a really good sign when you get to this point where you've read lots of these spiritual self-help books. It's a really good sign that it's time to start working with the more esoteric, these books that are written that are to be viewed from a different perspective. So I want to make it clear that I'm not knocking those books. I think they're very helpful. They can help people on their spiritual journey immensely. Okay, but that's not what I'm talking about here today. So what am I talking about here today? When it comes to esoteric texts, what you're looking for are books that have been written from people who you would consider to have become enlightened, or to be more advanced than you, be further along in the journey than you are. Okay, so examples of these texts would be the traditional spiritual texts. So the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Bible, all of these can be read from a literalist perspective, and also from an esoteric perspective. Now, of course, if you have religious trauma, these are not the books that you want to get started with. Can also apply to texts such as Buddhist sutras or tantric texts, or Blavatsky's work on the secret doctrine, Isis Unveiled. These are the types of books that I'm talking about. A lot of people are drawn to at this point is poetry and writings of these self-realized, or these people who you'd consider mystics. So this could be books like The Dark Night of the Soul. It could be Interior Castles. It could be the poetry of Kabir and Hafiz, or it could be Khalil Gibran. All of these beautiful writings that again can be read on a surface level, but can also be looked at from a more esoteric perspective. So that's not a recommended reading list, okay? What you'll find is when you get to this point on your journey, you're going to be drawn to certain texts, certain writers, certain books. And it may be that as I've just gone through some of those, that magnetic center of yours has just lit up and said, right, I need to go and research that. I need to look into that. Okay, but please don't take that as a recommended reading list. You need to go with what you are drawn to. When we study these esoteric texts, and they are to be studied, okay, the kind of aim and the intention behind the study of these texts is often to activate dormant wisdom within you. A lot of the time, especially if you're working with some of the older texts, or you're working with a text from a specific tradition, what happens is there's an activation process within your light grid in respect of what you have learned lifetime after lifetime after lifetime working with a specific tradition, which is why I do often recommend to people they go maybe a couple of centuries back in these texts. They are more difficult, but oftentimes we're supposed to come across these works and it's supposed to activate things within us. As you've heard me say before, from the Akashic perspective, even if we get to 100 years old, this is a very short lifetime that we have. Okay, every lifetime is a very short lifetime, and we're constantly building on our knowledge. We're constantly building on our initiations. We're constantly evolving as a soul. So don't be surprised if when you get to this stage, you come across a specific text or somebody keeps recommending specific authors to you. And as you start to read it, you actually feel this activation process happen and you actually start to receive downloads and information around this study work that you're going to do. A book I absolutely love is Ram Dass's Be Here Now, the original Ram Dass book that was given, and it's a beautiful book because it's a combination of his journey, different practices that he's tried, different things that he's come across. And I love the way he has a reading list at the back of the book, and I love the way that he separates this out because he calls them books to hang out with, books to visit now and then, and books that it's useful to have met. And I think that's a really kind of good common terminology way of explaining things. And the books to hang out with are what I'm referring to today in respect of the books to study. Again, I'm going to say this one more time before I get into the tips. You go with the texts that speak to you. Okay, reading lists, recommendations, that's all great, but we need that magnetic center working and we need to be paying attention to it. Okay, so we understand what it is that we're talking about. We understand we're talking about these texts to be reviewed from an esoteric perspective. And what I want to get into now is the how to do that. The first thing to know is when you're working with these texts and you're wanting to work with them from the esoteric perspective, not the literal materialistic perspective, the first thing you have to do is you have to actually commit to study it. Okay, and what I mean by that is this is not a race. This is not, I want to add it to my list of the year of how many books I've read. This is something that you're going to spend time with. So this is what Ram Dass refers to as the books to hang out with. Okay, this is a book you're going to work with, and you're going to work with it as long as you need to. And you'll know when you're finished with a book. There comes a point when you're working with one of these texts that you just know that it's done and there's nothing more that you're going to get from it and you can put it down. Okay, but The very first thing that we need to know is that you're going to have to take time with these texts. A lot of these texts are written in a way that you're going to have to read between the lines. You're going to have to put yourself into a different level of consciousness when you're reading it to be able to absorb the information and to receive those activations. One thing that can help is once you first of all picked the text, is that you start to work with it very slowly and you perhaps read maximum 1 page a day. It's not a race. We don't have to tick this off our list. We're going to work with it and we're going to study it. Okay. And you're going to work with that 1 page a day and you're going to read that 1 page or even 1 paragraph over and over and over again throughout the day, throughout the week. However long it takes you to really allow that information to start to work upon you. And the second tip is, as you're doing this, what you want to do is you want to ingest every single word. So these texts, when looked at from an esoteric perspective, every single word is important. And by slowing down and taking the time and reading it over and over again, you're going to see what I mean by the need to ingest each word. The third tip is take the writing or what you have taken from that writing with you throughout the day, in your daily life and into your spiritual practice. So maybe there's a specific sentence or a specific term that's really caught your attention in that first couple of readings of that page or that paragraph. Write it down somewhere. Maybe put it on your phone home screen or have it on a post-it note around you, but take it with you throughout the day and really just allow it to marinate. You've heard me talk before about the need to allow things to marinate, and this is very much the way that we're going to approach these esoteric texts. So we're going to take it with us in the day and also into our spiritual practice. So that's going to be our contemplation. Okay, whatever the word, the phrase, the concept, whatever it's activated within you, you're going to take it into your spiritual practice. The fourth tip is to meditate on that line. So not only take it into your spiritual practice, so maybe your spiritual practice currently consists of getting out in nature for a walk and you're going to contemplate that line, also take it into your meditation practice. Okay, so rather than, for example, using mantra in your meditation practice, take the line, take the concept into your practice. Again, we're allowing it to work upon us, and this takes time. And the last tip that I want to offer for you is journal any self-reflection that you have around your page, your paragraph that you're working with for that day, for that week. It might be that you want to work with it for a month, okay? This is not a race. You will know, just like you'll know when the book is finished, you will know if you're tuning into your internal technology when your work has finished with that page, with that concept, with that paragraph. So just have a book put to one side that you're going to use as a journal and use that for your self-reflections whilst you're studying a text. I have worked with some amazing esoteric texts, and I can tell you I study them for years. I'm a little bit of a book nerd and I love to read, and my members will tell you I'm always referencing these types of books and how much I love to find a little hidden gem, as in I wasn't meant to find it before, but now I have. But it does take years. And if you're someone who is very used to reading the spiritual self-help books that I was talking about, it can be a little bit scary when you come across one of these esoteric books or one of these books to study from an esoteric perspective, because it's a complete shift in gears. It's not, this is why you should do this practice, this is the practice, go do the practice, like the spiritual self-help books. It's okay, let's work with this. Now, of course, what we have to always acknowledge is we are limited by words. Okay, there is a level in your spiritual development where you start to understand and see the limitations that words offer. And this is why when you go into really high, deep esoteric teachings, it moves into symbols. So we have words, moves into symbols, moves into nothingness. Because what the esoteric texts are trying to do is they're trying to help you to really focus on the experience, for you to focus on what it is you're actually experiencing and doing your practice. So these are great. Esoteric texts can be really helpful, but you're also going to see the limitations that we have when using words. And any of you who've had a mystical or a transcendent experience is going to resonate with this. Trying to explain somebody what happened in your meditation or your near-death experience or even a plant medicine ceremony that you've had, trying to then explain that and how it's impacted you and how it's affected you and what it's done to you, you start to see how limited we are with words. So we can use all of these terms, we can try the best that we can, but there comes a point where we really start to see those limitations, and that will happen as you're doing these esoteric text studies. But what will also happen, as I said earlier, is it's going to activate certain wisdom within you. It's not a substitute for practice. Practice ultimately has to be the number one thing that you're doing while you're on the indirect path. If you're on the indirect path, practice is where the magic is at. There is no book, there is no esoteric text that you're going to come across that is going to do the work for you. Okay? But you can find them very supportive, very helpful, especially with unlocking and activating that wisdom that you have within you from working with those traditions in previous incarnations. I do hope you found this helpful, and I will see you next week for the next episode.